What up?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Halloween version or episode of the 5280 podcast. I'm Glenn Hauser, joined by Cam Parker and Gage Madrid. Mundungus is carting around 6 kids trick-or-treating right now, so he's a little bit busy.
Yeah,
Plus, I can pretty much guarantee he's picking through the candy tonight when the kids are in bed for sure. So, how are you fellas doing tonight?
Doing great, man. I felt outnumbered when I jumped on the stream and saw I was the only one out of costume. So I was like, you know what? We're going to do a last-minute Philip Lindsay costume.
Yeah, you look just like him. That's perfect.
Right. No, it's good over here. I mean, at my apartment, you rarely get any trick-or-treaters. And of course, and I tweeted it last night, but like whenever you get to the point where you're older, let's be real. When you buy Halloween candy, you're not buying it for the trick-or-treaters. You're actually buying the Halloween candy for yourself. That may seem, a little bit too, arrogant, should I say, in terms of Halloween candy and the kids. But yeah. It's true. When you get older, you buy the Halloween candy for yourself. So I'm going to be probably having a couple of Twixes tonight.
There you go.
100%.
There you go.
I already bought myself some candy, so got myself some Nerds gummy clusters and S tier candy.
So being on the East Coast, our trick-or-treating window just ended, and we did not get one. So not a kid, which is good for me.
Is that typical, Glenn?
Fairly typical, yeah.
Okay.
So we still put stuff out, but no one wants to walk up a driveway.
Are you one of the people with the trick-or-treating where you don't greet them necessarily, but you put it on the porch and have them use their judgment and grab however many candy that they grab?
That's my strategy. That's always been my strategy.
With the camera out there, so we could post it on social media and shame these kids. No, I would love to be able to answer the door, and like when we lived in other places, we would answer the door, and it was always fun. But, let's get to the topic at hand, because today, if you asked me how today would go 2 weeks ago, it wouldn't have gone like it did. And with the Broncos getting 2 consecutive wins, getting 3-5, they're quite honestly in play for a playoff berth if they can put things together after this bye week. They didn't trade anybody. In fact, the only trade they made was Randy Gregory a few weeks ago. What did you guys think of this whole trade period?
It was pretty crazy, because it just, even before the season started, there were so many different scenarios that were running through your head, but even then, like when you have the contract discussion, and we've had it numerous times on 5280, but it's like you start questioning, oh wow, this player could in essence be on the block. This player could in essence be on the block, or this player could necessarily be moved. And then, of course, as the season progressed, it's not turning out the way that we all expected. Now, contrast that to certainly with what we had with Mike Kliss being on for the 15 to 20 minutes that he was on. He sort of even felt the inkling that the Broncos may not necessarily trade anybody, but by that same token, they would still listen, and that they would, they may budge on a certain offer. Well, that to a certain extent kind of came apropos today, because it was like, they decided not to move anybody, which I think for the selfish fan in me, I actually enjoy that part of it. Like, I mean, we definitely look objective as far as like what they can do in moving a player, but from the sheer standpoint of the chemistry with Sean Payton, I actually love the fact that there's not going to be really any changes with it, because now you have a full season where you're going to get the growth with possible growth with Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Garrett Bowles was certainly mentioned as well. DJ Jones was a name that Mike Kliss even mentioned. Josie Jewell, of course, even on the defense. So the growth of that defense is even going to grow after the games that we've seen the last couple of weeks. So I love it personally. I actually love the fact as a biased, point of view in terms of just the enjoyment factor of it. So.
Yep. I think, again, there's the two sides of it that I look at, my fan side and then my analyst side. I mean, my fan side says, yeah, this is great. But then there's my analyst side that's like, okay, realistically, the one player I'm kind of upset we didn't trade is Josie Jewell, because he's going to be a free agent, and now you're basically not going to get anything for him unless you get a comp pit back. I mean, so that's probably the only one that really is kind of disappointing. But the rest of these guys, you might as well play the season out. And if we have to move on from guys, we can still do it this offseason. Jerry Jeudy, we can still move on from other players as well. I don't think after that Chiefs game, I pretty much knew that Simmons wasn't going to get moved, or we all knew from the jump, obviously, Pat Surtain wasn't going to get moved. But once that Chiefs game happened, I think we really started to get a pretty clear picture. Okay, the Broncos are trying to build this thing, and they want to actually keep everyone in peace for that. So I totally understand where the Broncos are coming from. I know that there are many on Broncos Twitter that are upset they didn't make moves, but at the same time, it's like, if you were only going to get a day 3 pick for someone like Jerry Jeudy, why the hell would you move him?
Let alone Sutton as well.
Exactly.
Right.
I think Sutton over the last couple weeks has really proven his value to this offense. I don't think Sutton was going to get moved. I think if any receiver was going to get moved, it's Jeudy. You still saw a couple of timing issues with Jerry Jeudy on that in that Chiefs game with Russ. And there were a couple plays where they weren't on the same page, at least one slant. And then there was a second one that actually ended up getting batted that I didn't realize got batted until watching the All-22 and seeing, I believe it was Jack Cochran, the linebacker, doing the whole I tipped the ball signal. That other one looked like Russ threw the slant behind. So there's just a couple of timing issues with Russ and Jeudy. So that was one move I thought we could still see, but after the Chiefs game, it became clear that we weren't having a fire sale.
It's especially you think about what that would do to just the nature of that locker room if the team, after breaking a streak, just the full team effort, the 5 turnovers, can you imagine if they gotten rid of some of the guys that contributed in that game?
Yeah.
And you get for a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick or something along those lines. That would have absolutely killed the culture that Peyton's trying to get going here. But when you think about, I saw a stat recently that 15 out of the 16 AFC teams are within 3 games of one another.
Yeah.
8 weeks in, and the only one that's on the outside looking in, and I'm taking a lot of glee with this, is the New England Patriots are 16th out of 16. But that being said, that means that if you can get a couple wins that maybe you weren't supposed to, or somebody gets hurt and you're a team that looked like it was a surefire loss all of a sudden becomes a win, you're looking at one of these 7 playoff spots, and it's not something none of us had ever really thought was going to be a possibility at 1-5.
That's what beating the Chiefs can do for you, man.
Well, and again, it's the stuff of what we talk about, right? Like, I think before the season, we thought there was a decent chance, that we would possibly split the series with the Kansas City Chiefs, but we didn't necessarily know if it would come to fruition. Because even by that same token, the more things progress, and I said this on the Incomplete podcast, but it's like when things transpire like this and you have a streak, it's like you want to see it happen before you actually start predicting some stuff in terms of a Broncos victory over the Chiefs. You think it's going to happen the way that the games have certainly, been going on between the Broncos and Chiefs. Like, again, like it's sort of the way it's gone is like exactly the way that, the Broncos have been with the Chargers in terms of winning some of their games, and the Chiefs the last couple of years, even dating back to when Fangio was there, and then obviously Nathaniel Hack and everything. Like, it just felt like the dam was going to break eventually, and you had the feeling something was going to happen, and you got to give credit where credit is due in the sense of, in terms of building that culture and in building the stuff of the future, possibly with or without Russ. The fact that, for one, you hired Sean Payton to possibly be that type of guy that can go toe-to-toe with Andy Reid. And he called a phenomenal game against the Kansas City Chiefs with how he was able to operate that. So he's already one up on nearly every single coach that's been in, the Mile High City in terms of finally getting the monkey off their back and getting that victory over Kansas City. And oh, by the way, you got to say it. We have to give Russell Wilson his flowers. Here's a guy that, former, Denver Broncos legend Frank Clark said it best when they played the Chiefs in Mile High. But when Russ went out in that game against in Mile High where Jerry Jeudy had 3 touchdowns, he said it himself that, if Russ was in that game, they probably lose that game. And and now, based on how things have transpired, you have to give him his flowers. So I mean, he has definitely played up to where he has against the teams that you need to play better against. I mean, he did it against Justin Herbert and the Chargers in the last game of the season. He's done it obviously, against the Kansas City Chiefs. Like every single team that he's played that is the better team, he's actually risen to the occasion and played about as well as you could ask for.
Let me pose a little scenario to you here. That first matchup against the Chiefs last year, obviously Russ gets knocked out of the game. I think we're all pretty much in agreement they win that game if Russ doesn't get knocked out of that game.
Right.
The second game, we should have won that game if it weren't for that BS pass interference call on Cortland Sutton. Now there's a world where Russell Wilson in a Broncos uniform is 3-0 against the Kansas City Chiefs if those bad plays go Denver's way.
Yeah. At the very least 2-1.
Yeah, at the very least 2-1. Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you think about just even this past Sunday, the fact that, he did not have the yardage stats, but the 3 touchdown passes, they scored in the red zone. The fact that the Broncos are scoring on opening drives as well at a massive clip this year is just, it's all progress, and I know there's just so much looking at just the blanket stats and such, and they can tell the story it makes someone look positive. They can make someone look negative. But when you actually look at just the overall success of this team and in this last couple of weeks and what has come into that, it's more than just numbers. It's more than just yards.
Yep. And, I think if you just look at the game plan for this game against the Kansas City Chiefs, they were screening and swing passing the Chiefs to death, but it was working. Why deviate from what was working and what was effective? I can understand the argument that game plan maybe was to hide Russ a little bit, but by that same token, again, it's like if you come out and notice the screen game's working, the run game was really damn good in that game. I thought second half there were some moments where it tapered off, but on the whole day, I thought the running game was really good. Again, like the third quarter, but then into the fourth quarter, they got those big plays, obviously, with the muffed punt and then just all kinds of stuff like that. We played complimentary football in that game. We really did.
And again, this is the most important thing in terms of a Sean Payton, led team too, is like when you stack wins together, when you stack wins and by stacking wins, put forth possibly your 2 most complete games of the season. Sure, we can say all we want that it was the Green Bay Packers, but that was still one of the more complete games we had seen all year. And then you go and do it against the Super Bowl champion and in your division, Kansas City Chiefs, a team that, you failed to win, over time and finally break the streak, and you were able to do it. And like, that's the thing is like, you could not stop talking about a game like that. And people could say all that they want, it's the regular season, championship for us. Just like, again, like when you lose X amount of games and you do it the way that the Broncos did it in the fashion that they did it, you relish in that. And because like the crazy, there's so many different crazy things for me. And the fact that the Chiefs never led in this game. They never led in that game. And the fact it was not a game-winning field goal, which would have been crazy too if they would have won on a game-winning field goal. They won by multiple touchdowns, multiple scores, and they held the Kansas City Chiefs under 14 points, actually even under 10 points.
They
right?
didn't even get in the end zone.
So it's like it was just absurd all the way around.
Yeah.
And another thing to point out too is a lot is made over the streak, and of course, like Romy even today was saying their kids in second grade that like had not been alive to see for a Bronco victory against the Chiefs.
I was in high school.
But when you look at it too, is that this was the first time that Patrick Mahomes in his career has lost to a divisional opponent on the road. So like, this is just not a Broncos issue against the Chiefs. They've been dominating the entire division. And I know that goes somewhat without saying, but the fact is that everybody's focused on our streak, which is now a winning streak. But Patrick has just dominated the AFC West for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And obviously there were the yardage that Pat Mahomes, put forth. And I comparing this, to the game that we certainly saw, what I'm going to reference is not necessarily comparable because that year they won the Super Bowl, but it sort of brought me back to the memory of how the Broncos played Aaron Rodgers in that Super Bowl year, like with how the Broncos defended Pat Mahomes. They kept him inside. You saw the pressure actually, happen within this team where they kept Pat Mahomes in the pocket, which is, easier said than done. I mean, he's still good inside the pocket, outside the pocket, but I mean, like, they really did such a good job of eliminating the big play with the Kansas City Chiefs and kept everything in front of them. It was such a perfect game plan, and you were seeing pressure from all across the board with this team. And there's so many people that deserve flowers, within this team on the defensive side of the ball, but you really do have to get your hats out to Jaquan McMillan and let's be honest, like if you actually look at it, even from the standpoint of the last week of the season or the last game of the season, he's actually been balling since then. He just hasn't had that full opportunity to be cornerback 2 or cornerback 3. So McMillan is really rising to that occasion and frankly should be quarterback 2 at this point.
Yep. I mean, one of my guys, dude, that has just been an absolute revelation. I absolutely love what we've seen from Jaquan McMillan, even dating back to training camp. I've been gushing all over Jaquan McMillan. It's cool to see like 2 of my guys in Jaquan McMillan and Jaleel McLaughlin really make such a massive impact for this team. And I want to correct something I said earlier. I said Russell Wilson would have been 2-1. It actually would have been 3-1 because I just want to block out that last game a couple weeks ago against the Chiefs. that game just doesn't exist to me. That was just an all around like burn the tape kind of game, honestly. So yeah, that one just kind of escaped my memory, but yeah, I just wanted to make the correction there. But yeah, man, Jaquan McMillan on the defensive side of the ball has really solidified the nickel spot, and Fabian Moreau as well. He's actually done pretty well on the boundary aside from Pat Surtain. So that gives me a little bit of confidence that the Broncos may have found a successful formula in the secondary. And then PJ Locke at safety as well, man. Mm-hmm. I think we need to actually have the conversation about PJ Locke being the starter when Kareem Jackson returns. I really do.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that conversation's not already happening behind the scenes for sure. And I did go after Fabian Moreau a little bit on Twitter during that game because he was getting picked on, did get, definitely an ill-timed penalty. But when you're thinking about the game 2 weeks ago, as bad as that was, and Gage has brought the word putrid back into the vernacular. I'm hearing it a lot lately.
Yeah.
As putrid as that game was, the Broncos only gave up 28 points in total to the Chiefs this year in the two contests combined. I mean, that's pretty spectacular. And Cam gives more flowers than someone on Valentine's Day, but VJ,
yes,
we owe him an apology.
We do. Sorry, Vance. You earned it, man. You called an absolutely brilliant game plan. Patrick Mahomes played like shit. He really did. Like, that was one of the worst games I've ever seen him play. Hats off to Vance Joseph. Hats off to the players on the field. Just hats off to everyone. That was an all-around just defensive domination.
Yeah.
And this is a defense that, 5 short weeks ago gave up 70 points. and they've not given up. In fact, they've now become the strength of the team. I mean, they won the game for us this past weekend. So it would be nice. Maybe someone can lead the cheer, the next home game, where, on the count of three, we're sorry, Vance, like the whole crowd collectively could just offer that apology. But, just you referenced the running game being so important. And this is kind of the offense that I was envisioning, when Sean Payton was hired, when the offensive line was retooled and some big signings and free agency, and they weren't really doing that throughout the course of the season, really up to this point. And I got to say, Javonte Williams looked like vintage Javonte Williams. I don't know if Angry Runs has been awarded yet, but I think that he should win it this week. I mean, he had more than one where he was dragging and not giving up. And it does make me a little bit nervous. I don't want him to get re-injured.
Sure.
But this guy looked like pre-injury Javonte for sure.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it to a certain extent, it's like it's one of the fears I still have for Breece Hall, because in terms of like what he's been able to do. But it's like you're starting to kind of see Javonte get to that level and get to that form that we've been so accustomed to seeing. And and it even goes back to the Packers game, like, and he's really putting forth games together, and like this really is exactly what the Denver Broncos signed up for under Sean Payton. You said it, Glenn, and I think that the thing that is a little bit of a surprise, too, is, and this is to Jalil's credit, but I actually think that the broadcast even said this, but the Broncos, I think, signed Samaje Perine to be that type of back that's going to be a change of pace back, which, oh, by the way, Samaje possibly is a change of pace back to a guy like Javonte. Just really didn't fit, but it made sense in terms of what he can give you in the passing game. But, the fact that, you aren't necessarily seeing a balanced attack between Perine and Javonte and then Jalil, you're actually seeing the last couple of weeks more Javonte and Perine and Jalil sprinkled in, here and there, which is, again, kudos to him, kudos to his health, where exactly he is right now. I mean, he's definitely becoming much stronger as the season is progressing, and not just the running game, the pass blocking game, as well as the receiving game. I mean, the touchdown that he had, that was as impressive. And kudos to that call in the red zone as well.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
a great
just
play call.
I mean, it's just all the way around really good in terms of this identity of the team.
McGlinchey as well. I mean, Gage, you were there. What were you seeing from the offensive line, especially with him on the right side?
McGlinchey actually had one of his better days. He really did. Like pass pro, he still had I think one or two, but run game, he was mauling cats. And I thought he held up pretty decently for the most part. So McGlinchey was really good. Lloyd Cushenberry, Quinn Miners, Ben Powers, those guys were phenomenal.
Yeah.
They were great to load, all three of them. They really were. Like our interior O-line has really become one of the biggest strengths, especially hats off to Quinn Miners. That dude was playing like a man on a mission out there. And he had actually said prior to the game, I'm hoping it snows. I'm hoping it's cold. That means we're going to run the ball more.
Yeah.
You could tell he was ready to go in there and start mauling cats. And to the point of Javonte Williams, the Broncos just being more comfortable utilizing him more and more. You come and look at his total carries. Week 1 against the Raiders, he had 13 carries. Week 2, 12. Miami, he had only 11. That's understandable. Obviously, that game got away quick. Well, at least in the second half it did. The Bears, obviously, he got hurt in that game, only had 2 carries. First Chiefs game, 10 carries, 52 yards. Packers game, 15 carries, 82 yards. And then 27 carries in that second Chiefs game. I mean, they were really riding him big time.
It was crazy. And he didn't necessarily get to his 100 yards. He didn't get to the 100 yards. I mean, that is, you thought for sure he was going to get to that point. But I mean, still, the point still stands. He was absolutely phenomenal. And, Lloyd Cushenberry, I'm going to do it again. I'm giving him a flower. But I mean, like for Cushenberry, like, Chris Jones is one of the most
Bachelor tonight.
Yeah, that would be a rose, right? But still, but I mean, like Chris Jones is one of the most dominant defensive players in the NFL. Was his name even called like during that game? I mean, it was just like you rarely heard his name called, which to your point, Gage, like that is just the identity of this football team is not just the fact that they are running the football, but truly the investment that they've been making in the interior, and of course, Mike McGlinchey, to his credit, when you are putting forth the identity of your football team, and Mike McGlinchey is certainly a great run blocker, that is going to help you in the game. And in terms of extensions, and I know that it's maybe we never had this conversation before, but at least yet, but we definitely have to have a conversation about extending Lloyd Cushenberry, and do they do it, with the way that he is playing, because he is truthfully playing like a top 3, top 5 center right now in the National Football League.
Credit goes to him, man. I mean, he's really like some of the play strength issues that I really harped on him. He's really hit the weight room. It feels like he's really been a more well-rounded center over this last year. Just hats off to Lloyd Cushenberry. And I agree, we definitely have to have some extension talks and try to lock him up now, because if we lose that, that's going to be a really big loss. I feel like Cushenberry's always handled the mental acumen of the center position really well. And let's say we do go out and get a young quarterback this offseason. I want somebody who is a strong center, a strong veteran center to help carry that young quarterback. And Lloyd Cushenberry would absolutely fill that role. And another guy we need to have a conversation about, I feel like, is Garrett Bowles, man. He's playing really good football right now, especially considering the concerns that we had about Garrett Bowles earlier in the offseason, or at least that I did in training camp. I was really worried about him, but I think we can now fully chalk that up to he just wasn't quite healthy yet. He's getting healthier and healthier as the weeks go on, and his play is definitely reflective of that.
So, Gage, I always like to ask, like when you and Cam have been to the games and when Mike and I have gone and things like that, I always like to get a feel for the atmosphere and just kind of the behind the scenes aspect of it. And with the snowstorm the night before, the field looking real messy, to the point where the game started and there was literally no evidence that there was any snow at all. They did a phenomenal job. But what was it like outside the stadium before, dealing with the cold, the tailgate, that type of thing? And how was the atmosphere inside the stadium?
Well, I mean, I got to the stadium a little bit later than I normally do, but the temperature wasn't that bad. I'm somebody who likes the cold. I was actually wearing short sleeves out there.
Oh, man.
I'm crazy. I mean, I was layered up, but I was wearing short sleeves. That's just kind of how I am. I love the cold, so I was kind of like Quinn Miners. I was hoping it would snow, but it really felt like a playoff atmosphere out there. Yeah. It really did. Just the stadium was shaking at points. It really was. I mean, the crowd was getting so hyped up when it finally became clear that we were going to break the curse. The players were hyping up the crowd. Russell Wilson, Justin Simmons, Alex Singleton, all of them were just really firing up the crowd. And I was behind the Chiefs sideline, and just seeing the dejection from everybody on that sideline was so good, man. And the Chiefs fans were shocked. They were legitimately shocked, man. Like they thought that at first they were like, oh, this is cute. We're going to let them, have this little bit of a cushion. And they're like, oh shit. We're going to lose this.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible. I was right next to a couple of Chiefs fans watching their faces slowly but surely droop as they finally realized they were going to lose to the Denver Broncos. Oh, it felt good.
So when did they kick in with Shake It Off, and what was the immediate reaction from both Chiefs and Broncos fans there?
Well, the Shake It Off was I was going live for my my post-game show. I was just standing kind of in the lower bowl doing my show, and I was hearing the Shake It Off, and the whole chat exploded just laughing, man. We all got a good laugh out of that. Chiefs fans were just kind of rolling their eyes, and I was watching everybody come down the concourse and just the "Let's go Broncos" chants, and not having to hear the Chiefs' stupid tomahawk chop chant. That made it a lone one. I didn't hear that one time. I didn't hear a single one. And normally, whenever I go to a Broncos Chiefs game, it almost feels like Arrowhead West. Just getting to send those players home with a loss, man. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, it was like I said, you could say regular season championship all you want, but the fact that it was that sweet, like to a certain extent, it was almost like the Nuggets against the Lakers. I hate to say it, but it was like the Nuggets against the Lakers. I mean, just when you felt like they were getting close, the Denver Broncos just pulled away even more. And it's funny that we talk about in terms of the Chiefs finally realizing this is actually going to happen. There was one point. There was one point of this game, where you felt your heart kind of sink into your stomach a little bit, and it was on special teams, which, on that block kick, you thought he was offside. You thought, he jumped a little bit early. He just happened to time the snap a little bit. But, once that happened, you're just like, oh no, this is the moment. Like, this is the moment where everything is going to snowball, but, again, special teams, to even their credit, maybe one of the best units, for the NFL right now is special teams.
Mike Westhoff effect.
I mean, Mike Westhoff effect. But I mean, they were also such a huge momentum push for in this game because, obviously the Chiefs had been a team that I guess, from the broadcast had really struggled with special teams, into the season. And Hardman, who had not been with the team, for a bit, is there returning a punt, and he muffs it, and Drew Sanders picks it up. And oh, by the way, he held on to the ball, and
Funny story about Hardman. So I was actually watching him in pre-games against the Jets when he was here. He muffed a punt in that pregame, and then like 5 minutes later, it came out that he was going to be inactive for that game. Like, it was just during the warm-ups when they weren't even in uniforms yet. He was fielding some punts, dropped one, and I think that's when they decided they were going to make him inactive for that game. And it was just absolutely hilarious that moment comes full circle in that stadium where he drops a really key punt. Drew Sanders recovers it. And even the play before that, or the play before the blocked field goal, I should say, where Russell Wilson got sacked, that was the one where my heart kind of started to sink a little bit. I was like, oh, crap, this is going to be a miss. And sure enough, it was borderline offsides, but it really, when you go back and review it, it kind of looks like he just timed the snap perfectly. Hats off to Justin Reed on that one. That was kind of the moment. And then when they punted right before on the play where Hardman muffed it, when they had stalled that drive, that was kind of one where I was like, this might not be good. And then obviously 30 seconds later, that whole momentum changed, and that ended up setting the Broncos up to win the game, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
And then obviously Justin Simmons' interception. Got to give Simmons some credit. 5th career interception on Mahomes, baby.
That's right.
And I love that he caught it instead of knocking it down. Like any other player, you're like, all right, he can knock it down on 4th down and it would get, we'd get good field position. But I just wanted Justin to get another interception against Mahomes. So I didn't care if the return itself wasn't going to get us to the point where the original line of scrimmage was. I was just so happy that he had that experience. The fans got to see that, and he could be embed himself further into Mahomes' head, because that he's living somewhat rent free in there.
Yeah.
So changing the course of the show a little bit, we're gonna do a segment that was not even remotely possible or worth doing prior to this past Sunday. Essentially, at the beginning of the season, like a lot of the shows, we went through week by week and we made our predictions based on the per game. I thought that we would be much better off. I only saw us really losing one of the Chiefs games, the Dolphins game. And so I think I had us at 6-2 coming here. And here we are at 3-5. But we're going to walk through the balance of the 9 games after this bye, starting with the Monday night game at Buffalo. And that looked like it could be a very, very ugly game. I think that was one of those that I had predicted to be a loss. But the Broncos really could stand a good chance in this contest, even with Vaughn back, even with Leonard Fournette joining the squad. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, this is just going to be an emotional game for me. Seeing Vaughn go against the Broncos for the first time, I might shed a tear. I might, because Vaughn is responsible for my best football memory of my life. That's Super Bowl 50. I love Vaughn. I will always love Vaughn. He's really still one of the faces of the franchise, even though he's not here anymore. I mean, this one's going to be tough for me, but just in terms of Buffalo as an opponent, they have shown that they could potentially be vulnerable. They've played down to their inferior competition in a few games. I mean, Jacksonville, who's still a really strong team, I feel like Buffalo, on paper at least, is the better team. Obviously, they lost Matt Milano in that game, which was a killer loss for them. They lost Tre'Davious White the week before that. So this could be another one of those games where our offense could do some good stuff, considering they are shorthanded on defense. I do want to establish the run game again in this game just to neutralize Von Miller and the pass rush. We'll probably do a game preview for that in our next video, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. But again, Buffalo does look like a beatable opponent. And hi, Kitty.
I think there, and I even tweeted, I want to say today, but it bears repeating, that now that we are in the month of October and the Broncos are 3-5, that Sean Payton's record, and this was coming into the season as head coach of the Broncos, is 125-66. And then the one thing I tweeted this morning is like, if you look at it from just the overall perspective in terms of, the Detroit Lions and with where they were last year starting 1-5, if you're looking at some similarities, Dan Campbell comes from the Sean Payton coaching tree. So it's like, if this team, with no trades and everything, and if they buy in, which clearly it seems like they have in the 2 weeks that we've seen this, it seems like they're starting to buy into that identity, and they play exactly like they did against Kansas City. You can't necessarily predict what they're going to do with the defensive all the time, but if they duplicate exactly what they did against Kansas City, they can beat a lot of opponents in the NFL. So if they duplicate that, they absolutely have a chance against the Buffalo Bills.
So what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Be a very similar defensive game plan.
I'm going to say yes on a win. I think that this team is not going to want to waste the momentum, the goodwill, just the excitement of the last 2 weeks. I think they're going to come alive. And to Gage's point about the run, Buffalo isn't, ranked very, very high as far as run defense goes. So I think that's probably going to be a major focus as well. And who knows what the weather's going to be like in Buffalo, upstate New York, it could turn on a dime. You just never know. Right. But Diggs and Gabe Davis are both coming alive. So it's going to be a challenge, but I'm going to go with a win there. I think we're going to walk out of there with at 4-5 after that Monday night contest.
I still think it's going to be a loss coming off of that bye, just because, like, to the same thing that I mentioned about the Kansas City Chiefs, I want them to prove that they can beat those quality opponents time and time again. So I will still say a loss, but I do think it'll be a much more competitive game than we have seen, obviously in years past.
Yeah, I think this might be one of those losses. I have it as a loss, but I think this might be one of those losses where you come away still feeling at least okay about where you're sitting. I don't think this is going to be a blowout like the last time we played the Buffalo Bills, both preseason and regular season. I still remember that COVID game in Denver where Josh Allen came in and just absolutely eviscerated Vic Fangio's defense. That game still gives me nightmares. I don't think it's going to be anything of that proportion, but I think we can keep it competitive and keep it maybe within a score of Buffalo. I think after that Bills game, though, is where the Broncos wins could start coming, because they've got some very beatable opponents, starting with the very next opponent, the Minnesota Vikings.
And, all right, so that game would appear, at least it presently appears to be a second national broadcast. It's a Sunday night game, Vikings at Broncos, but I think that's probably going to get flexed out. I can't imagine that they're going to keep that in there. But with Kirk Cousins tearing the Achilles the other day, a trade for Josh Dobbs, a rookie quarterback starting right now in the interim, Justin Jefferson out presently. I'm not sure if he'll be back at that point, but I just do not see the Broncos losing to the Vikings in that at all.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a win on that one, but I think that, and I think I had a win before the season started, just because you were just unsure about Minnesota, but they were starting to come alive with Kirk, and then obviously he tears his Achilles, but I'm really curious to see, because like I don't want to compare it to the New York Jets situation, but it's like the Broncos, to be fair, had a golden opportunity to beat the New York Jets with no Aaron Rodgers on the football field, and this is a golden opportunity where they have to beat, and I say actually have to beat, the Minnesota Vikings now with Josh Dobbs and Jaron Hall, where there's a possibility you may actually see both play in that game. Yeah. So, I mean, so they have to win that game. Jordan Addison is a dude, so you got to be on your P's and Q's for that. Alexander Madison, is a decent enough running back. They got T.J. Hawkinson, so they have enough playmakers, but again, they have to win that game.
Yeah, Vikings, man, going into the year, they were such a volatile team. You really didn't know what you were going to get with them. Honestly, you didn't know if you were going to get the Vikings team that pull off all those miracle wins last year, or the Vikings team that really started off the year rough, but started to rally over those last couple of weeks. And that all started again with Kirk Cousins, man. That 49ers game was one of the best games of Kirk Cousins' career, honestly. And then he was following it up, carving up the Green Bay Packers, and then tears his Achilles. Just absolutely brutal. I agree. This has become a must-win game for the Denver Broncos. Just one of those ones that you have to take care of business. It's an inferior opponent, at least with an inferior quarterback situation. You've got to take advantage of that. And it's not going to be like the New York Jets game where there's all that emotion going into it, where every single player on that Jets roster wanted to win that game for Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, this one's going to be the Dalton Reisner revenge game, though. So I'm really excited for that one, though.
And I should point out, anyone in the chat, if you want to offer your predictions as well, that would be great. So
yeah, please do.
So all right, so it looks like after 10 weeks, you guys have the Broncos at 4-6. I have them even up at 5-5, and a miraculous, comeback of sorts. And
optimistic Glenn, right?
Yeah, I just feel like the momentum is here, and things that weren't happening at the early part of this season are now starting to come through for the team. And again, week 12, Cleveland another Browns. Winnable game. Browns in Denver and Power Field. I think we're going to win this game as well. I don't know if Watson is going to play. He's being cleared. It's just such a weird relationship that team has with him. Stefanski is coaching for his life right now. And I see this as a win as well.
I quite frankly hope Watson does play, because he's a liability whenever he does play. This Browns defense is going to obviously give the Denver Broncos challenges. They are one of the best defenses in the NFL. Myles Garrett is a one-man wrecking crew. Obviously, they've got Zadarius Smith on the other side of him, Denzel Ward at corner. They've got a strong linebacking core with Anthony Walker and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I mean, that Browns defense is freaking nasty. So that is going to cause Denver some issues. But at the same time, the Browns offense has been absolutely volatile, especially ever since Nick Chubb went down. I mean, and even Kareem Hunt now too, who is actually giving them a little bit of a resemblance of a run game. They're just really struggling. And I don't know what's going to happen with their quarterback situation, whether it's going to be PJ Walker or Deshaun Watson starting. But either way, I think Denver can win that game, given that it's going to be an inferior quarterback situation once again for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, you almost feel like they actually stand a chance with PJ Walker at quarterback.
Agreed.
Versus the guy who is, the quarterback that actually has the worst contract in NFL history.
It's not even close either.
And worst deal too, mind you. We should, continue to push that narrative, because it's true. Not anybody that is continuing to force this idea that Russell Wilson, and stuff was the worst trade of all time and stuff like that. So we should force feed that again. But really,
a terrible person too.
He belongs in prison.
The only way that the Cleveland Browns win this game is due to Jim Shorts.
Yep.
That's the only reason why they'll even stand a chance in this game. But I do think that, with Sean Payton coming in and with that point of what the momentum and where they're going to be at, there's going to be, I think, times where, they'll see some of those big chunk plays. I mean, it's worth repeating with this, or maybe we even, had a chance to talk about it, but like the Broncos, even dating back to Nathaniel Hackett as a weird statistic, have like one of in the top 10 as far as explosive plays, as far as opportunities for explosive plays, in terms of the offense. So I think there will be opportunities where they will get some of those explosive plays against the Cleveland Browns. Whether they capitalize is up to Russ and, the communication and so on and so forth between Jerry and in terms of these elite defenses. But yeah, it really just hinges on Jim Shorts. And I do think they come out with the W.
And to that point, Cam, I mean, we saw the Indianapolis Colts light up that Browns defense for a couple of really big explosive plays. Gardner Minshew was lighting them up, kind of. So, however, he also turned the ball over in that game multiple times. That was a big issue. But on the plays where he didn't turn the ball over, he actually did kind of light that defense up. So the Broncos that do have that tendency to bring out explosive plays, that could be a Marvin Mims breakout game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that kind of foreshadowing, I'm all over, Gage. So let's hope that's the case.
Yes,
all right. So just recapping where we're at as far as I have the Broncos now at 6-5. You guys have them at 5-6, I think, right? After 11 games. This is a game that scares me a little bit. And the Broncos in week 13 of the season, they are at Houston. And Houston has exceeded all expectations this year. They're 3-4 in their division, or the 3-4 for the season. They lost their last game, but they really played well. CJ Stroud has just shown that he was an excellent choice. At Houston, I'm a little concerned about this, but I think this is one of those that if you're a real team, you got to win this game. What do you guys think?
Agreed. That's one of those ones where you have to win it, but at the same time, man, that is a very fishy game because of how well Houston plays. They're a young, scrappy team that is so well coached. I cannot state enough how good of a job D'Amico Ryans is doing, and Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator. They're playing really good complementary football. I mean, they've really made a 5-course gourmet meal with chicken shit, let alone chicken salad. I mean, they've really turned that team into a respectable organization. Hats off to D'Amico Ryans. That's what a coach can do for you. And I'm hoping that Sean Payton can have that similar effect with the Denver Broncos.
And that's exactly, I think, if we're to do a little full circle here, that's exactly what I think you're starting to see with this team. Is they're buying in. It took a little bit of some time to gel, but it seems like they're truly buying in. And, to the credit of the Houston Texans, they did something that is risky, but I mean, by that same token, like, they really went with it in terms of drafting CJ Stroud. Then they come right back into the first and get Will Anderson, and CJ Stroud really wanted Tank Dell, and Tank Dell is one of the big proponents of this new offense under Slowick and a big time weapon for the Houston Texans. And CJ Stroud is benefiting, from actually having weapons. That's the other part of this is the Houston Texans have weapons now at their disposal with this offense. And, of course, with D'Amico Ryans, he's a defensive minded coach. So when you pair those two combinations, it's a little bit scary in terms of that combination. So I think going into this season, I had the Texans as a trap game necessarily with the Chargers coming up next, in Los Angeles. So back-to-back road games. So, but I do think that this is going to end up coming out as a win. But this is one of those where you have to be careful, where, D'Amico Ryans, who knows certainly how he feels. Obviously, so much was made about the whole head coaching cycle. And, did the Broncos, actually – reach out to D'Amico Ryans. I'm sure, I don't want to rehash this again, but it's just like, maybe he feels, I doubt it, but like maybe he feels some sort of, emotional thing, not being hired by Denver, and possibly when everybody thought he was going to be hired by Denver, so, I mean, who knows? Like there's also that, of course, side story that may come out of this again during the Texans week.
I think his dream job was the Houston Texans, so I don't think he's going to be able to. I don't think he's going to waste his time with trying to draw.
I agree.
Some motivation from that, but there's that connection there. So so what did you guys have? Because I have it as a win, the Broncos' 6th win in a row to get to 7-5.
I have them going 3-0 in that Minnesota, Cleveland, and Houston streak.
All right, so you guys are at 6-6 now.
With that Houston, because the next week we've got Chargers on the road. That usually smells like loss for the Broncos, at least ever since Justin Herbert has been the quarterback. We lose at LA, we win it here. I don't see any reason why that won't continue. So I probably have that Chargers game as a loss.
I hate to agree with you. I'm on board with that. I think we're going to lose that game. I don't have a whole lot of respect for the Chargers. I think they're completely overrated. When you set them side by side with the Broncos, there's not much difference with the struggle. But for some reason, everybody just keeps kissing up to LA Chargers versus the Broncos, and it just drives me bananas. But I think we end up being 7-6 after that game.
Yeah. Or do you mean 6-7?
No, I had us at 7-5 going into that game. I had 6 wins in a row.
Yeah, so I would be 6-7. That I think that the Chargers, just again, like it's just such a tricky game to predict, and like, but by that same token, like in order for the Broncos to have a really good year, you need to try and find a way to sweep those divisional opponents. And maybe the Chargers are that team where they sweep a divisional opponent, but in order for them to go 4-2 in the division, they got to do it,
Well, I mean, if there's any team that we only have 2 games,
right?
So it would be the Chargers. But just in general, like if you had asked me before the season if there was a divisional opponent we would have swept, I would say the Chargers, just because of their tendency to charger. That's what they do.
Yeah.
San Diego Superchargers.
San Diego.
So that brings us to week 15. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that brings us to week 15 of the season, and I think that this is a game that was scary to begin with. It's gotten scarier. This team is so dominating, so fun to watch. If the Broncos aren't going to win it this year, I would love for the Detroit Lions to ball out. Week 15 at Detroit. I see this as the Broncos' 2nd loss in a row, evening up the record at 7-7 at that point.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want to speak for Gage, but I feel like we may be on the same boat on this one, because like I think that this is going to end up being a loss. I mean, like it's going to be also an emotional game for both Dan Campbell and Sean Payton, the master Jedi and the Padawan learner, of course, going up against one another. So it's going to be an emotional one, but we all know that Jared Goff plays unbelievable football in a dome, and it's just what happens. I mean, like I feel like if you were to call what is the prototypical quarterback that would fit a Coors Field narrative, it would be Jared Goff, 100%. His home road splits are absurd with what he has. But also the Lions are such a well-coached football team. And, so I just feel like it's just going to be it's going to be an emotional game, but I do think it ends up being a loss.
Yeah, and just the way that they're playing their offensive line, man. Shout out to ex-Bronco Graham Glasgow. I know John's gonna have some love for that, but Graham has been playing some great ball there in Detroit, playing both guard spots, and last night he was their starting center. I mean, hats off to their offensive line, in particular Graham Glasgow, but just overall, that whole team has just completely done a 180 over the last couple of years. Dan Campbell, guys have fully bought into that culture. Dan Campbell has his guys in the building, and they're a prime example, I feel like, of what the Denver Broncos could become. Sorry, my computer got unplugged. They're a prime example of what the Denver Broncos could become within the next couple of years if we really trust the process with this Sean Payton stuff.
100%.
Yep. So I have us as a loss on that one.
All right. So where are you guys at as far as 6 and 8? Are you at
6 and 8.
that point? Okay. I'm at 7 and 7. But thankfully, the bleeding is going to stop, fellas, because in a very unusual game, Christmas Eve night.
And
the
that one's
Broncos-
not getting flexed. That one is the set
No.
night game.
Yeah,
Christmas Eve.
that is really strange. But it's Christmas Eve night. The New England Patriots are coming to town. Worst team in the AFC. Don't seem to be getting any better. One injury after another. Actually, no deals at the trade deadline. I see this as a big time win for the Broncos that night.
Yeah, I'm smelling blowout. I really am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for one, I'm going to be there, and apparently I'm a good luck charm, I guess, whenever I'm there, because ever since the Chargers game dating back to last year, and of course the Packers game, I'm like 2-1. I feel like the game that I remember most where it was a loss was the disappointing one with Rich Boccia and the Raiders, where they just blew the Broncos out at home. So, but ever since then, it's been nothing but W's for the Broncos, and so yeah. Not to play spoiler, but I have them going on a winning streak to end the season.
All right. Yeah, exactly. Because week 17, we have the Chargers for the second game for the season, but this time at Empower Field. And Broncos are going to win this game, get to 9 and 7 at this point. To everybody's
Denver is
dismay.
Justin Herbert's house of horrors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So fair to say a win for all three of us at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And oh, by the way, it's also Justin Herbert horrors because Pat Surtain is on that other side. The last time he played, was it here? He had the what is it? The 2 picks off Herbert. One was the pick 6, right? It was the pick 6.
That was 2021.
It was 2021. But I mean, still,
Yeah.
he is he's definitely terrified of him. But yeah, I got it as a win, and I wouldn't be surprised, even if it's at home, if this is a 2-score victory.
Yeah, I agree. Chargers are so suspect. I agree.
So at this point, the Broncos are really on the cusp of a playoff berth, regardless of of the three of ours record up to this point. And so to close out the season, the Broncos are in Vegas playing the Raiders in Josh McDaniels' final game as coach of that team.
If he hasn't been fired already.
Yeah. We're going to win that game. We're going to win that game. It's going to be 10 and 7 season with a 1 and 5 start, a historic bounce back. We're going to become the America's darlings once again. But the 10 and 7 after the Broncos beat the Raiders. Guys?
I got 9 and 8. So that's still a winning record after the start that we had, man. If we could pull out a 9 and 8 record and make the playoffs, that would be such a successful year one of the Sean Payton era. I would be so thrilled with that. And I mean, we're really only a couple games off from where I had the Broncos record wise. Like, I had us beating the Raiders week 1, and I had us beating the Jets. Those were the games that are swayed. But aside that, we're not too far off from my initial record prediction for the Denver Broncos, and I had us going 11 and 6.
Yeah. I had us beating the Raiders, Washington, and the Jets. So I had us losing to Miami, one of the Kansas City games. So if it lines up moving forward, even as we originally predicted, we're still in good shape. Some of these streaks could be pretty significant. Some of the bad teams do line up one after the other. So it's been a fun exercise, and I think, like Gage said, if the Broncos can make the playoffs after this in Sean Payton's first year, I mean, it would be absolutely, just a gargantuan feat, and the power that would give the players moving forward, it would just wipe away all the mess from the last few years for sure.
100%, and I think that what's crazy is I'm looking back on my schedule, and I had a loss to the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
I had a loss to the Jets, and of course I had a loss to the Chiefs. But really where the miss is coming in, because I obviously have 9 and 8 too, is really the Las Vegas game and the Washington game, in the early part of the year, because those are wins at the beginning part of the year. But I mean, I think that So basically, if we're to use math, the Broncos have to go 6-3 at the end of the way, which is totally doable. I mean, it's totally doable. And I think that a lot of it is going to start after this bye week. And, I think that this is the most important thing to kind of tie a bow with even the Kansas City Chiefs conversation is we cannot stress enough how big of a victory. Yeah, we can talk about the fact that they broke the streak, and so on and so forth, but it's having that win going into the bye. And so I think that when you have that kind of win going into the bye, that's how you win a locker room. That is 100% how you win a locker room. And when you are riding high like that, you want to make sure you are riding that momentum. So no, I wouldn't be surprised if they did come out with a victory against Buffalo, but like that's the kind of thing that does ride you to a 9-8 season.
Yep. And probably the best part about it, for me at least, going into the bye, knock on wood, we've been relatively healthy. We're not going into that bye absolutely banged up where we have to rest a bunch of guys. Guys are going to be coming back, like, even if they're dealing with some minor ailments here or there, guys are going to be back healthy, fresh, and ready to rock and roll. That's a rare advantage for a team that has upward momentum like we do, coming out of a bye with really our hardest part of our schedule behind us. So this is one of the most favorable situations for the Broncos that you could ask for. It really is.
And that's why I'm so scared about losing to Buffalo and what that could do for the rest of the season. So that's why I had that as a win. I just think that they're going to keep the ball rolling, and just to even have that extra day with it being a Monday night game. I think we'd also be remiss about not comment if we didn't comment on Russell Wilson's Halloween costume, Halloween party, and the guests at the party. It just didn't seem to, that picture and those videos did not seem to fit the narrative that the players do not like Russ.
Seriously,
teammates don't like
Russ looks like one of the guys, man. Even at the game, like I was watching the whole dynamic with Russ. Guys were dapping him up. Even on the sidelines, he has conversations with everybody. Like I see him having conversations with Will Lutz, Riley Dixon. I see him having conversations with Jaleel McLaughlin. Hell, I see him having conversations with like practice squad guys and, like Damari Mathis. He has conversations and tries to make sure that he's one of the guys and has conversation with everyone, really.
Yeah.
But even the Halloween stuff, like I didn't see who all was in the picture. I just was mostly paying attention to Russ's Coach Prime costume. I just kind of glossed through it on Twitter real quick.
Yeah.
TP was there. Jerry Jeudy was Pennywise, which I think is so appropriate because people he's clowning some of the haters. And I just think that that's so great. Sertan was in there. Gosh, who else was there? Were quite a few players, but these were like a lot of the stars and a lot of the guys that he has day-to-day interaction with. And I was pleased to see it. I was happy to see it. I was glad to see him at the Nuggets game last night and get a good ovation when he was shown on the screen. Just the guy's taking such a beating, figuratively and literally, and it's hopefully the tide turns as far as the attitude towards Russ and the respect that he does deserve. But anyway, we should probably wrap things up. But it's been a fun Halloween episode. I still can't believe Gage's costume. I mean, that is like he like went undercover for sure on this. But please join us for any of the other shows. We have shows all throughout the week on the MHRT network. And we'll be back next week previewing the Bills game, just giving you sort of any sort of information that we have throughout the bye week. It's probably going to be pretty slow news day or news week at that point, but hopefully the players are enjoying their time off and they get that. But just want to say thank you to everybody in the chat. Really appreciate it and hope everybody has a very happy Halloween.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat.
All right.